Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Another Alberta pastor and a Calgary mayoral candidate have been arrested for breaking public health orders. We hear from the Canadian Mental Health Association about how they're helping Canadians cope during the COVID-19 pandemic. And following more shootings in BC, police say they have a plan to crack down on gangs and recent gun violence along the West Coast.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Health Services is notifying 10 clients who received their Pfizer COVID-19 shot at Lethbridge Exhibition Park that the vaccine provided to them may not have been effective. Officials say some people on April 29th may have only received a saline water diluent and not the vaccine itself. AHS says it will be directly contacting the affected parties to rebook their immunization appointment. Health officials say diluent is part of the final vaccine product and is administered as part of the shot. The product is kept in a separate vial, which is normally mixed together to create the final vaccine product. The Alberta government says it is changing public health restrictions to allow drive-in events to take place throughout the province. That includes drive-in movies here in our city. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dean Henshaw, says there is some criteria, however, which needs to be met.
Anyone attending these events must attend only with members of their household in the same vehicle or two close contacts for those who live alone.
Now, the owner of the Movie Mill here in Lethbridge, Len Binning, is pretty excited about today's announcement.
I'm thrilled that it's official. We had taken steps. We've worked very closely with our AHS here locally, and we've got a friendship there that, you know, we've spelled out our steps along the way. We've crossed our T's, we've dotted our I's. We've got a very good relationship. And as of Saturday, we had a green light to go ahead. So we held an event Saturday night, about 90 cars, about 270 people. We showed Back to the Future. It was a phenomenal success. We had people coming in to use the restroom, but they were commenting, I've had nothing to look forward to for over a year. This is so amazing. Several people made that comment. And then when the show was finished, we got the equivalent of a standing ovation as all of the cars honked their horns in appreciation, waved and said thank you as they left. So, you know, it brought pretty much a tear to our eyes and made us excited to sort of be back in the business.
Premier Jason Kenney says the key in getting our province back to normal is seeing more people being vaccinated to ease the strain on our healthcare system from COVID-19.
There are more than 22,000 active cases in the province now. Our positivity rate is sitting at 9.6%. There are 647 Albertans in hospitals with COVID-19 right now. And we talk a lot about capacity in our healthcare system, but this is what it looks like right now. Of those that are in hospital, 186 of them are in intensive care. These 186 Albertans are critically ill with COVID-19, and that's a record high for the pandemic in Alberta. Many of these are people who are sedated because they're on respirators, unable to breathe on their own, and who cannot have any human contact except through layers of PPE.
A mayoral candidate in Calgary and a city pastor are the latest Albertans to face charges for violating provincial COVID-19 health laws. Police allege Kevin Johnston was in violation of a Court of Queen's Bench order when he attended an illegal gathering on Saturday morning. The order imposes compliance with public health restrictions on organizers of events, including attendance limits, masking, and physical distancing. Police also say Pastor Tim Stevens was arrested Sunday afternoon for organizing a church service that was held earlier in the day at the Fairview Baptist Church, which police allege did not comply with public health orders. The mental health of many Canadians has suffered dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic. David Gabbard, who is with the Canadian Mental Health Association, says it used to be 20% of us suffered with mental health issues, and now it's closer to 40%.
What we've seen in this third round of findings is that 40% of Canadians are reporting sort of a drop in their mental health or their mental wellness over the course of the pandemic, which is not shocking from what we're seeing here in Lethbridge, or from people accessing crisis services or those sort of things. We know that prior to the pandemic, 1 in 5 Canadians struggled with mental illness in some way, shape, or form. But we also acknowledge that 5 in 5 Canadians, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health that needs to be taken care of.
David Gabbert with the Canadian Mental Health Association will also discuss steps you can take to help improve your mental health. That Q&A with Jeanette Rocher is coming up later in our broadcast. Residents near Westminster Elementary School in Lethbridge are frustrated after finding needles and gun ammunition in a park. A concerned citizen took to Facebook calling out Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with a volunteer who regularly patrols the area for needles, and she says this isn't the first time she's come across dangerous materials.
Robert Meyer has lived in Lethbridge for 20 years, and he's irate that needles, drug paraphernalia, and even feces has been found at the park where his grandchildren play.
I'm angry now. Now my question is, do you have children? Do you have grandchildren? Do you think you would be upset? Do you think you'd be hurt if your city, your grandkids, your child was poked with a needle, got sick, possibly died?
On Sunday, Lethbridge police received reports of 8 needles, a naloxone kit, and pistol ammunition by Westminster Elementary School. Sarah Villebrun, who found the items, says she canvasses the area every 2 hours, and finding needles at the park is a common occurrence.
I find needles quite frequently. More specifically, I guess, there's a lot of people that are using narcotics in the park. So I go over there. If I find somebody in the park that's using, I'll ask them to clean up their own needles.
Mayor Chris Spearman encourages community members to reach out to the city's public services numbers. He admits council has not been able to combat the drug crisis, saying the city is in dire need of supportive housing and recovery centers.
We haven't really made any progress on homelessness, and associated with that is drug use and crimes. So until we actually begin addressing the underlying issues, we will always have these social issues.
Lethbridge police declined an interview, but say the ammunition found Sunday will be held to see if it may be associated with another outstanding file. Bridge City News also reached out to the Lethbridge School Division and did not receive a response. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
A new initiative is encouraging us to shop locally and wear a mask while doing so. The Youth Advisory Council of Lethbridge created the YQL Mask Challenge to showcase local businesses that are needing the help during the pandemic. The founder of the challenge, Joshua Croker, says once you visit a business that has signed up for the challenge, they will receive a mask and be entered to win a prize. That is, if they post a picture on social media while using the hashtag YQL Mask Challenge.
You'll walk into any of the identified social media, any of the businesses on the social media account, and then once you walk in, you can go and ask the manager, whoever's working at the front, if you could have a YQL Mask Challenge mask, and they'll give you one. And the idea is that you post a photo of yourself with the mask on, either shopping in the store or outdoors, and you'll just submit it via DM, direct message, to one of our social media accounts. And we're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So we have over 12 businesses participating right now, and we have over 200 masks given out.
Croker says he's received positive feedback from the challenge since so many people love supporting local businesses. Scams involving contractors are happening a lot more frequently lately. Hiring a company for lawn care can be a nightmare. And for one man, that meant losing money after the company asked for payment up front and delivered bad service. As Micah Quinn explains now, to make matters worse, the company wouldn't even return his phone calls.
Tyson Gallant received a flyer in the mail from a company called Treetop Lawn Care, so he contacted them to come over to do some work on his lawn. He says what resulted was anything but good service.
They were supposed to show up on Friday. They didn't show up till late Friday when unfortunately, I wasn't here. I was at work, so my wife was here by herself. They said, okay, well, if you give us the payment up front, we'll bang this job out. We won't bang on your door anymore, so the baby doesn't wake up. And so she paid them, and then they pretty much just did a quick hack job, power rake, and then left. They didn't do any aeration or any power, any hand raking like they said they were going to do, and just left the yard a complete mess.
Bridge City News reached out to Treetop Lawn Care, but didn't receive a call back before our broadcast deadline. The Facebook page for the company was also taken down. The Better Business Bureau, serving southern Alberta and East Kootenay, is warning consumers about contractors who trick homeowners with a deal that seems too good to be true.
What they're offering is a great deal, and the great deal usually turns out not to be so great because they either provide very shoddy service or don't provide the service at all and then disappear, and the consumer is paid for the service, but they didn't get anything for it.
LaFortune says the BBB has tips on how to avoid these scams.
If you see multiple complaints about a business, be very wary about hiring them. Also, get everything in writing. A reputable company should be offering, the offer in writing and detail exactly what's going to be the service that's going to be provided and what it's going to cost.
Gallant says he didn't think a company would go through all the trouble to make a flyer, website, and Facebook page just to scam people. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, along with a few other groups, have released a free e-book which shows what governments need to do to help our economies get back on track. To discuss this in a little more detail is the Federal and Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano. Franco, what are some of the highlights of the book, Life After COVID, What's Next for Canada?
The book looks at how governments can move forward after COVID-19 in a very taxpayer-friendly way, which is super important because the federal government is already more than $1 trillion in debt. Now, one of the things the book touches on is how to grow the economy in a taxpayer-friendly way. And what we talk about is that to grow the economy, we don't need more government, we need less government, right? We don't need higher taxes like higher carbon taxes. We need politicians to lower taxes and let us keep more money in our pockets so that we can spend in the local economy. And we're also recommending that governments continue to reduce red tape and remove the roadblocks that are making it harder for us to actually develop our resources in Canada.
Now, will you be sending this book to our provincial and federal politicians?
Free ebook is online. We're going to be posting it all over Twitter. Of course, we're encouraging all our politicians to read it. But one of the most important things and reasons we did this book is for everyday Canadians. So Canadians can look at the challenges that we have to understand how we got into the certain circumstance, and that so Canadians can put pressure on their local representatives and politicians for change.
So Franco, where can we find this free ebook, Life After COVID?
Please head over to taxpayer.com and you can get your free copy there.
Thanks so much, Franco. That was Federal and Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano, joining me from Calgary. As tensions arise between Israelis and Palestinians, lives are being lost and people are fleeing their homes. But what started the violence? We spoke with a Lethbridge rabbi who says the conflict began over unpaid rent.
Jews had title to the land and had built the houses there. And then for a couple of decades, it was in the hands of Jordan. And in 1967, when Jerusalem went back into the hands of the Jewish state, there was court cases at that time in relationship to the Palestinians living in those houses. And the Supreme Court said if they're not going to pay their rent, they must be evicted. It spread to the Temple Mount. They were throwing rocks down it over the wall to where the Jewish people were praying. In solidarity with that, Hamas began to shoot rockets out of Gaza into Israel. In the last 2 weeks, over 3,000 rockets have been fired from Gaza into Israel.
At least 12 people are dead following a cyclone that made landfall in Mumbai, India's second most populous city. As the storm advanced further inland, nearly 150,000 people have been moved from their homes in the state of Gujarat, where the cyclone hit late Monday. Suketu Shah, who's the vice president of the Gujarati Society of Lethbridge and area, says he's concerned about his family back home.
In Gujarat right now, I have family in Vadodara, which is right next to Ahmedabad, around 120 kilometers out of Ahmedabad. So if it hits Ahmedabad really bad, then you know what, it will be a head-on hit for Vadodara as well, which is a very rare chance right now. But you know, according to the weather thing, they have closed the airport, so which gives a little bit of more worries to us as well, that when Ahmedabad is so far from the sea coast, why it has been shut down.
Closer to home, the recent gang and gun violence on the lower mainland of British Columbia has angered many, including the mayor of Burnaby, BC. The latest shooting in a public area left one man dead and 2 others injured. Police say they are targeting and going after many gang members.
When crime like this happen in our public spaces, it can be very unsettling, and it is very unsettling. Canada is a safe country, and Burnaby is a safe community. What is happening in our region right now is completely unacceptable. We will not tolerate this. This is not who we are as Canadians. This cycle of violence must end.
The end goal is to find those responsible, get the evidence, put handcuffs on them, bring them before a court, bring them before a judge, and make sure that they see the inside of a very cold, steel jail cell. That is our end goal.
Restaurants and bars in Regina were able to join the rest of Saskatchewan and reopen for in-person dining today. Officials say they were going to relax some of the COVID-19 restrictions. Seating will be limited, however, to 4 per table, and there are rules for distances between tables. Also, no alcohol can be sold after 10 p.m. 2 more Manitoba school divisions are moving to online learning this week. The Garden Valley and Red River Valley school divisions will change to remote learning on Tuesday and will continue until the end of the month. The addition of those divisions means 373 schools in Manitoba have now moved to remote learning out of the total 820 schools in the province. Manitoba health officials say social interaction and gatherings of students going to school or on their way home have been contributing to community transmission. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer says as more Canadians receive a first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, they can look forward to a summer of small outdoor gatherings such as barbecues, camping, and picnics. Dr. Teresa Tam says in the fall, as more receive their second dose, Canadians can expect to return to indoor work and more recreational activities.
In very general terms, this means we'll be able to get back to small outdoor gatherings with family and friends, camping, outdoor sports, small reunions at picnics, parks, and patios will begin to bring us together in person again. We will still have to follow local public health advice and keep up with individual measures like physical distancing and wearing a mask as recommended. Heading into the fall, as more and more Canadians get fully vaccinated, giving us broader protection across our communities, we'll be able to look forward to moving indoors together. This would mean getting back to indoor work, in-person learning at colleges and universities, and recreational activities, as well as finally being able to get back to the in-person multi-household celebrations and holidays.
The war between the Jews and Palestinians continued over Gaza. At least 10 Palestinians were killed in a single airstrike on Saturday. An Israeli military official defended his country's recent strike on a high-rise building in Gaza City that housed offices of the Associated Press and other media outlets.
Regarding the Al-Jalaa Tower, it's not a media tower and it's not a media center. It is a tower that was used by Hamas for 3 main purposes. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, but mostly Hamas. Islamic Jihad have an office there as well. The IDF decided to strike that tower, and out of consideration for the safety of civilians, non-combatants, of course journalists, then enough time was given for these people to evacuate the building. It is an extremely difficult situation to distinguish, but we will continue to do the most that we can in order to minimize civilian casualties. We are aware of the international focus on it, but most importantly, we don't want to kill civilians. We have no business killing civilians. We have a business and a commitment in killing terrorists.
With India battling a deadly second wave of the novel coronavirus, a mega church has been converted into a 300-bed COVID care center. As we hear in this next report, the senior pastor of the Calvary Temple Church says they're simply responding to God's call to demonstrate Christ's love in action.
While India continues to be devastated by the second wave of the pandemic, one church in Hyderabad has converted its building into a COVID care centre with 300 beds providing free medical treatment, medicine, oxygen and meals. Calvary Temple pastor Dr. P. Satish Kumar says the key motivation is to demonstrate the love of Christ.
We admit anyone who knocks our door without caste, creed, race, and religion. we admit them, and we try to provide needed treatment, showing the love of Jesus Christ in action. The response is tremendous. They believe that they're in God's presence, in God's temple. Most of the people pray here and then seek God's help and encourage one another. And it has been a wonderful experience in showing the love of Christ to all these needy ones.
Pastor Kumar says they plan to extend these COVID care centres to all of their church locations.
Calvary Temple has 8 branch churches, and we are opening all our branch churches to provide the facility for COVID patients. And we are trying our best to make sure that we provide a treatment to all these needy ones. God is love, and God is expecting us to show his love in action. We don't convert people, but we direct people to the one who created them so that they will find the way and find peace and happiness.
And while Calvary Temple establishes more of these care centres, they're also continuing to be the hands and feet of Jesus by distributing much needed food packages to countless families in desperate need. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
Nice to see the church helping out once again. Well, it felt a lot like summer again today as we were well above 20 degrees, and the mercury will be dropping, however, as we move further into the week. Full weather details are coming up. Hopefully you got a chance to get outside and enjoy some lunch while also enjoying the summer-like temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta today. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, the mercury, however, will be dropping by midweek, and we may even see some much-needed moisture.
Yeah, and here we thought we had summer in the bag, didn't we? But nope, that temperature is going to drop by midweek later on, looking at actually single digits by Thursday. And that moisture you were talking about could come in the form of some flurries later this week. So we've got a drastic change coming up soon. Into tomorrow, going to be a bit of a windy one. We're going to start out with a west wind gusting to 50, and then those winds are going to pick up to 60 and 90 kilometers per hour, all in the morning though. So it's going to be a windy, gusty morning tomorrow. That is going to be Tuesday, 20 degrees the high. Into Wednesday, that's when we're looking at seeing those showers begin. High of 10 degrees. Look at that temperature drop right there. Overnight, Wednesday night, we could see a possibility of showers or flurries. Into Thursday, chance of showers rather again. High of only 8 degrees on Thursday. Into Friday, that's where we're seeing that chance of flurries or showers. High of 10 degrees. And then into the weekend, Saturday's high 12 degrees and then up to 15 on a Sunday. So a bit of a rocky start for our long weekend coming up. Average high for this time of year, 18 degrees, average low, 4 degrees. 31 was the high temperature on this day back in 2006. And in 1955, it was -3. Sun rose this morning at 5:44 a.m. and the sun set this evening, 9:12 p.m. I am loving these evenings. It feels like summer is definitely here, even though it looks like we got a bit of snow coming our way. Hopefully not though, fingers crossed. Over on the west coast tomorrow, chance of thunderstorms in both Victoria and Vancouver, a high of 14 in both of those cities. Edmonton could see showers tomorrow, up to 5 millimeters of rain and a chance of an afternoon thunderstorm, high of 13 there, high of 16 in Calgary tomorrow with 60 winds, so a bit of a windy situation in Calgary tomorrow as well. Over in the rest of the prairies, we're looking at warm temperatures here. 30 degrees in Saskatoon, mix of sun and cloud, chance of an afternoon thunderstorm tomorrow in Regina, high of 32 degrees, 30 in Winnipeg, 60 kilometer per hour winds from the south and the humidex of 31. It's going to be hot and muggy there. 27 in Toronto, sunshine in Ottawa, 26 degrees. And a sunny day as well expected in Montreal with a high of 27 degrees and a 30 wind as well. Over in the Maritimes, chance of showers in Fredericton tomorrow, 23 the high, 22 in Halifax. Risk of a thunderstorm there. Same thing for Charlottetown with a high of 19 degrees. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, only a high of 9 degrees, but we're looking at 40% showers and 40 kilometer per hour winds. So there you go.
Today's weather is brought to you by Jeff Reimer of Royal LePage South Country Real Estates, 403-380-1779.
Canadian farmers are getting the chance to earn more money as the global economy recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials from the Grain Growers of Canada say agriculture prices have increased between 10 and 75% from last year. Supply shortages from droughts in some areas contributed to higher prices. Andre Harp, who's a third-generation farmer in Alberta's Peace region, says many parts of Western Canada are dry right now. He says they'll need to get an average crop to benefit from higher prices. The Canadian Real Estate Association says home sales hit a record for the month of April, even though they declined from the previous month. CREA says the number of homes sold last month dropped 12.5% from March, as close to 85% of local markets saw declines. That includes most of BC and Ontario. But sales were still up 256% compared with a year ago, when sales collapsed due to the pandemic, while the average price jumped almost 42% from April of 2020. AT&T is merging its media operations with those run by Discovery in a deal valued at $43 billion US. The move will create a new company that will combine AT&T's properties, including CNN, HBO, and TNT, with Discovery channels like HGTV and the Food Network. The new media company enters a streaming arena that has already been flooded recently with new players, including HBO Max and Discovery Plus. Industry analysts say the deal is a sign that more mergers are ahead. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 107 points on the day to finish at 19,475. The Dow was down 54 points to 34,328. The S&P 500 was down 10 points to 4163, and the Nasdaq was down 50 points on the day to 13,379. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 98 cents to 66.35 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 16 cents to 3.12 US. Gold was down 10 cents to 1866.80 US an ounce, and silver was even at 28.17 US an ounce. Wheat is at $349 per metric ton, barley's at $356, canola's at $9.16, and corn is at $402 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 5 cents to $115.35, feeder cattle were up 38 cents to $137.93, and lean hogs were down 8 cents to $108.65. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 82.86 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government says it is changing public health restrictions to allow drive-in events to take place in our province. That includes drive-in movies here in our city. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Henshaw, says there are some criteria, however, which needs to be met. There can only be members of the same household in the vehicle or 2 close contacts for those who live alone. Many Canadians have suffered with mental illness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Coming up, we hear from David Gabbert with the Canadian Mental Health Society, who has tips on how to help you during the dark times. That interview with Jeanette Rocher is on deck.
Well, we know that the pandemic is taking an emotional toll on people, but are we getting the proper help we need? Joining us today to talk about this is David Gabbert, Communications Lead with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta South Region. David, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Now, can you give us any stats on how we're doing when it comes to our mental health? To what degree is the COVID pandemic affecting us? And I would say probably a lot.
It is a lot. Actually, there was a study that was released just last week as part of CMHA's Mental Health Week that was done with the University of British Columbia, and they've done it in 3 rounds over the last year. And what we've seen in this 3rd round of findings is that 40% of Canadians are reporting sort of a drop in their mental health or their mental wellness over the course of the pandemic, which is not shocking from what we're seeing here in Lethbridge or from people accessing crisis services or those sort of things. We know that prior to the pandemic, 1 in 5 Canadians struggled with mental illness in some way, shape, or form. But we also acknowledge that 5 in 5 Canadians, we all have mental health, just like we all have physical health that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah, the statistics are staggering with 40% now since the pandemic. That's crazy. So what are some of the specific mental health issues that people are struggling with more as a result of this pandemic?
Well, that was one of the questions we asked in the study that was undertaken. And there was a lot of different responses, as you can imagine, because everyone's mental wellness journey is so unique and so personal to them. Some of the common things we see are isolation, not being able to talk to family and friends, not having the support networks that they normally would rely on. as well as things like depression and anxiety, fear of catching COVID, or those sort of things as well.
Yeah, I think some of us are feeling more lonely, depressed, and anxious than usual these days, of course. But how do we know if our mental state is actually at the point of needing that professional help?
It's very hard to tell that. That is a challenge for anyone accessing services, for anyone in their daily life. The best advice that we can give is, if you're uncertain, reach out. In the same way that if you're uncertain if you need to go see a doctor, it's better to call 811. It's better to go see and book in with your family physician. If you're concerned about your mental health at all, reach out to some of the supports in the community. Maybe that's the distress line. Maybe it's community links. Maybe it's some of those free supports, just to assess and sort of see where you're at and see if there is something that you can reach out or do for yourself.
Now, David, mental health seems to be a little bit more of a buzzword now, but is there still a stigma attached to it, or is it a little bit more in the forefront these days?
I think the idea and the conversation around mental health is very much at the forefront. I think that stigma really comes in on that personal level. So it's much harder for me as an individual to reach out for help than it is to talk about the fact that mental health is an issue in our society and something that we need to address, especially in the times of COVID. I think we see the stigma coming from walking through the door of a counselor, or being seen or associated with being weak, or being less able to handle the stresses of day-to-day life. I think there's a lot of ways people can reach out without that fear, whether it's online, whether it's through a phone or a distress line or those sort of things. But I think the stigma is still very prevalent out there.
Yeah, so you think if someone is very depressed or anxious, they might be a little hesitant to let anyone know about it and go for that professional help, huh? Wow. So what kind of feedback do you get from those who do actually go for help? And of course, you were saying there's other ways to do it now online. It kind of takes that stigma away, doesn't it?
It definitely mitigates it to a large extent. I think there's also this misnomer that if you go and get help, everything's going to instantly turn around, and it's going to be better. There's going to be, a light at the end of the tunnel, and definitely there is, but it takes work, just like any sort of medical issue that you have to work through, or anything along those lines. It's not necessarily you'll go see a counselor once, you'll go see your doctor for mental health supports, and everything will be better. It's a journey, it's a process. And I think it's a process that 5 in 5 Canadians are on, especially in this time.
Wow. Now, does it make a real difference? Does it help their situation to seek counseling?
In a lot of ways, yes. And sometimes it's counseling, sometimes it's other supports that are out there in the community. So it can be everything from addressing, maybe it's a relationship issue, maybe it's a challenge or struggle paying rent or taxes. There's other things that we can do to take care of our mental health beyond just the counselors and psychiatrists, which are a key part and sometimes help, but may not be the whole fulsome solution to actually get to the root of the issue and have that positive mental well-being going forward.
Yeah, for sure. Now, how many people actually know where to go for help? Is there coverage available for those who can't pay for like a psychologist, for example?
So there's a lot of places that people can reach out. And I think there are a lot of supports that are available at low or no cost, depending on what you're looking for. Especially for people who are struggling financially, there are subsidies that are available through the city of Lethbridge. I know Family Ties and Woods Homes have free counseling that's available here in Lethbridge. So I think there are options available for those who want to reach out and find those supports. And if you're uncertain, it's a scary, daunting system to reach out to. You can always reach out to community links, and they can help try and find supports for you, so you're not navigating the system on your own.
Yeah, and speaking of which, I think you are one of those, aren't you?
Yes, so we actually run community links here at CMHA. So community links, we have some trained social workers. Normally when the library is open, they'll sit at a desk at the library for people to go in and just talk about what's going on and those sort of things. Right now they're available over the phone at 403-328-5465. And people can call and reach out and just explain what's going on, and they're there to help people navigate the social support system here in Lethbridge.
Okay, and do you have a website as well, if people wanted to look you up?
Yes, it would be lethbridge.cmha.ca, pardon me.
Okay, great. Now, you were talking about getting connected with professionals, but sometimes it's even a good idea to just start talking to a friend, right? Or clergy, maybe even an HR manager at your workplace. Like, just start with where you're at, right?
Yeah, I mean, we all as humans have those connections. We have those social support systems that we're connected to. And I oftentimes the leaders in those areas want to see us succeed. They want to see us be healthy, whether it's a pastor, whether it's a manager at work, whether it's a friend or a colleague, whoever that might be. If you feel safe, chat with them, because chances are they may know supports, they may know resources in the community. And if not, at least you're not navigating it by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you had mentioned some scary stats at the beginning of this interview with just the rates of mental illness going up, or mental health issues rather, 40% you said since the COVID pandemic started. But do you know if the suicide rate has gone up as well during the pandemic?
I don't have any specific stats on the suicide rate. We're seeing more suicide that is being covered by the media. So we know that there have been those who have lost their lives to suicide over the course of the pandemic. But I couldn't speak in any further detail to just what those rates look like, to be honest with you.
Right. Now, have we also seen an uptick in substance abuse in order to cope with loneliness or depression or unemployment?
That was one of the questions that was actually put out in the UBC study. And substance use, whether it's alcohol, whether it's illicit drugs, whatever it might be, has seen an uptick as just a way for people to try and cope with the changes in the stress, or the added stress to day-to-day life, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Now, speaking of stress, what are some good ways to just kind of reduce that? Obviously, we were talking about like just talking to friends, get some exercise. Any other ideas there?
Yeah, there's lots of little things that we can do, whether it's journaling, whether it's detailing, whether it's reading. Find those things that really speak to you. And if it's not working, try something new, whether it's a book, a walk, a bike ride, whatever it might be. There's lots of different ways that ultimately we know what's going to relax us, what helps us at the end of the day, to unwind and process what we're going through. And it's important to take that time for ourselves.
Definitely. And I think now that the weather is getting nicer, it should help a little bit.
Yes, very, very much so. I mean, Lethbridge has some amazing parks, and the River Valley in and of itself that are all amazing places to go, whether it's to go for a walk, a bike ride, relax, just go sightseeing, see what animals you can find, make a miniature scavenger hunt. I know Helen Schuler has some amazing resources out there for things to look for in the River Valley. So there's lots of options.
That's great advice. Now, if you happen to notice that a friend or coworker has really been struggling with mental health issues, what are some ways that we can approach them to help them get some help?
I think the main thing is just asking if they're okay, and inviting them, and making yourself feel like you're a safe place or a safe person for them to chat with, a non-judgmental, not trying to tell them what to do, but just really being there to listen rather than give advice is usually the best thing that we can do as individuals.
Yeah, that's great advice, David. Any final thoughts or final advice to viewers who may be struggling with some kinds of these mental health issues?
Of course. I think my biggest advice would be, if you're uncertain, if you're struggling, if you are struggling, to reach out. We have many different programs here. And you can reach out online too. So, I mean, if you're actively feeling like you're in crisis, the Distress Line of Southwestern Alberta is always available. The phone number for that is 403-327-7905. Community Links is also available if you're just curious about resources in the community and think you might be struggling in some ways. Their number is 403-328-5465. And there's lots of courses that you can take through our recovery college as well, just to help increase your resiliency and see what sort of skills you might want to brush up on. And you can check out their website at recoverycollegelethbridge.ca. And beyond that, connect with the resources that you have, connect with the people that you have, and check in with one another and see how you're doing out there.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you so much for being with us today, David. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem. My pleasure.
David Gebert is the communications lead with the Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta South Region. Well, being a parent is a challenge in the best of times, but with the middle of COVID restrictions, that challenge seems to get a lot harder. Joining us today to discuss this is Gary Mason, pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. Welcome to Bridge City News, Pastor Gary.
Awesome. Great to be with you. Thanks.
Absolutely. So, are you hearing from parents in your community that COVID restrictions and kids having to stay home, not getting to socialize with friends, that it's causing more tensions in families?
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you think about it, I like to think a lot of times from a biblical perspective, being a pastor of a Christian church and everything. And so I think all the way back to Genesis, when God first created man, and he makes this statement, we always use it when it comes to marriage, but it really applies to everything, that it's not good for man to be alone. We were created for relationship. And when that gets limited, that causes problems. And I mean, that our own mental health, let alone our children and what they're going through, the stress of all of that has created lots of issues for people, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Now, what advice do you have for parents to handle the conflicts that might be coming up with their children these days? Typically, we'll see raised voices, sarcasm, disrespect, etc. So, what advice do you have?
Yeah, well, I, it comes back to relationship a lot of times. And are we building those relationships with our children? A lot of times, I suppose in the past, we all got so busy that things were going on. And sometimes even we had teachers and I like teachers, so not against all of that, but teachers, coaches, we left the raising of our children to them, and we didn't get involved in our own children's lives. And so I think that we have to make sure that we're maintaining relationship, we're maintaining conversations. I also think that we've lost the art of conversation in our society. We have cancel culture and all of that going on that people talk about and different things. But a lot of times we've lost the art of conversation, being able to listen with respect and speak with respect, right? And so within our homes, we should be creating an environment where we can have those conversations, and it can be a safe spot for our children to talk and everything, and keep those lines of communication with your children open, no matter what their ages. You got to keep that open. And especially as they get into their teenage and adolescent years, that's really important. So
I like that, open communication. And of course, when communication is open, of course, maybe things are going to come out that the truth comes out sometimes. So apologies can be key, right? And forgiveness. So is there a poor way and a better way to apologize?
Sure. There's always one of the things that I try to do with our we have four boys, and they're all from 16 to 22. And so as we've talked to them over the years, we try to get them to just accept responsibility in the apology. If you got to apologize and justify what you're saying, then the other person then takes it oftentimes as an attack on them again. And so what you want to do is just straight up take responsibility for your part of it. Even if you weren't to blame, maybe you weren't wrong in how it was done, but they felt wronged. They felt like, and so sometimes you have to apologize and just say, you know what, at least I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to come across that way. I didn't mean for, and so just take responsibility. If you're always justifying, then how much responsibility are you really taking? And that's a big deal in the conversation.
Very good advice. Now, teens and young adults, screen time is always up in their lives. But of course, during COVID time, social media use has risen even more significantly, hasn't it? So what would you say to parents as to how to set boundaries when it comes to screen time or social media use?
Well, I think it's twofold in some of that. Number one is, are we checking the boundaries in our own life? And then are we talking about the boundaries with our kids, which goes back to relationship and conversation and talking to them, not just telling them here's the boundary, but telling them why the boundary's there. And there's lots of information online about the struggle that comes when there's too much screen time and what that does to us. And so to be able to stop and sit down and have that conversation, say, this is because I care about your own mental health and some of those things, and talking to them about, even as they grow and mature, and sleep patterns and overnight and all of those things, when flashes are coming on your phone and staying up all night, this doesn't help them with good development in their own process of whether it be mental health, physical health, all of that. And so to begin to talk about those boundaries, but to also display them in our own lives. Our house, at a certain time every night, the Wi-Fi goes off, and my Wi-Fi goes off as well as their Wi-Fi goes off, because the truth is that if that's true for their mental health, it's true for my mental health. And so we try to do those kind of things and have those conversations, apply the same things to our own lives and whatever. There's always exceptions, right?
Yeah.
One night you might stay up a little bit later and do some things, but there's certain things that we can do. And that's a difficult, sometimes that's a difficult conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but leading by example, it's very smart. It's hard to do though.
It is, because it's easy for us to get drawn in. I mean, social media is, we know now that a lot of it was designed actually to draw us in and to create almost an addiction within us, and all of that. And there's lots of studies for all of that, so you can find that. But if you understand that, then you understand that I need to keep it in a place where it's not controlling me. And so if I do that for me and I display that to my kids and I tell them about the importance of that for both of us, then that helps.
That's very, very smart. Now, I think it's a given that your kids are likely to disagree with your boundaries, right? I'm not talking just about your kids, Gary, everybody's kids. They don't like those boundaries sometimes, even though they need them. So any practical tips on how to communicate effectively with your kids, with kids in general, on issues like this?
Yeah, totally. I think that's a great question, because a lot of people, they have those struggles, but that's where being a parent comes in, and not just being a friend, not just being, and that's a longer conversation, I'm sure. But the reality is we still have to direct and help. At certain stages, when my children were 3, then it was, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And I'd pull them away, and there was no question, there was no conversation. But as they grow, you have to begin to treat them differently. You have to begin to tell them why you're making these decisions. You have to begin to tell them not only why they're making the decision, but then give them an opportunity to make the decision and correct it if they're wrong, so that when the time comes and you're not around, they know how to make the right decisions, right? And so it's a process that goes. Now, if you haven't done that ahead of time, or you don't have that kind of a relationship with your children, I think you need to step back and begin to build that relationship. And always, there's a book that was written years ago. I think it was John Trent, I'm not sure. But he wrote a book called The 2% Difference. And it talks about, rather than making big, wide changes, let's just make a 2% change today until we have that, and then make a 2% change in a week or 2 or a month or whatever. And as you slowly move the needle over, you're going to change things over time, rather than doing something that's just, it's too hard on everybody.
Now, Gary, I might be old-fashioned, but is it still key for kids to play sports or out at the park, or maybe some board games, even if it's just with their siblings or a small group of friends outdoors?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's old-fashioned myself. I think it probably depends. I suppose if you all decided to go out and churn butter, that would be old-fashioned. But that's not what we're talking about. And so playing a board game or playing a video, sometimes, like every family day at our family, we play one on a Nintendo, I think it is. We played a Mario and whatever Olympics as a family, right? And then we do other things that day as well. But so we have this tradition that we've done on that day. And there are other days we might do something else. And sometimes we go for motorcycle rides. We all ride and stuff. And so I think
your
that
kids
it's
are
not
older, so they can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
But we played video games when they were younger. Now we do motorcycle rides now. But even when they were younger, they would sit on the back, right? So you have different things that you can do along the way. It's only old-fashioned if what you're doing is old-fashioned. The fact of spending time together will never be old-fashioned. That's important for all of us, especially within the home, and especially right now when sometimes you're limited to your home. But getting out to the park as well with friends and having some time with them, outside, I think the limit right now is 10 people in a group. And so to be able to do that, that's really important as well, because they need that interaction. And you know what? I don't run with them like their friends run with them anymore. When they play football, I might play football with them, but I'm the guy that jogs now. I'm 51, so I'm the guy that jogs now. And so they need those guys around them too, and they need those relationships too. So
That's awesome. So a big part of parenting is the process of passing your faith on to your children, if you are a person of faith, of course. So how can we do this effectively?
I think at that point you've got to talk about living it out in front of them. I think you've got to allow what you believe to be seen in them and discuss it with them. Again, if I want to transfer something to them, I got to talk about it. I've got to then live it out and be real in front of them. If I'm struggling, as they get older, I even talk to them about my struggles and things, and as well as all the victories and all of that along the way. And so just allowing yourself to be real, allowing yourself to have that relationship and growing it with them. So
That's awesome. Now, with that said, how important is it for families to be part of a local church in order to thrive spiritually?
yeah, well, I'm a pastor, so I believe in the power of the local church, right? But I think community is really huge, and when you have a community that is working towards the same goal, like growing as Christians and reaching out and evangelizing, having what would you call it, compassion ministries within your community, feeding the hungry or clothing those who are poor, doing all those things, is reaching out in different parts of the world. Whatever it is that we're doing within the church and within those things, being together, doing that together with other people is really important. Actually, we've homeschooled our boys for a number of years, and one of the things that's really interesting in some of my studies of that was that the only time they spend all their time with people of their age is in school. As soon as you graduate school, you go to college, you get a career, you're in a job, you're with people of all different age groups. And so one of the things that you find is that if all they ever do is spend time with their age group, they actually lack certain identity strengths. They will have at times even identity crisis that they go through because they don't know who they are. Whereas when you get them into a larger group, a larger community with adults and everything, and those adults then endorse them and speak into their lives and have those conversations as well, adult endorsement for those young people brings more strength to their identity than their peers does.
That's amazing. And it's one of those things that you might not think about because, they tend to hang out with people of their own age group. But that is really
and
good advice.
And when you talk about family time and you talk about sharing your faith, what better way than to do that within the context of whether it be worship or listening to the word that's being preached or prayer and all of those things. Those are really intimate times. I think I don't think enough believers recognize the value of the local church. As a matter of fact, my 16-year-old, I shared a couple of the questions that we were going to go over today with a couple of my boys today. And my 16-year-old said, to this question, he said, I don't think people realize the importance of that. And he's 16.
Wow. Spoken from the teen right there. Wisdom. We can learn from them, can't we?
Oh man, I learn from them so much all the time. And today's world is different than our world. We can't look at it and say, well, why aren't you like me? Or why,
Yeah.
Man, it's just a totally different world, like it was for us with our parents.
Yeah, totally. So what do you say to parents who maybe feel that they've messed up already? It might be just too late for their kids at this point. Is it ever too late?
I don't think it's ever too late. I think that there's always opportunity. I'll admit that if you don't do it when they're young, or you did it really when they were young and treated them like they were 3 all the way till they were 23, then you have problems and there's things to overcome. But I think, again, you work on that 2-degree difference. You begin to make small changes in your relationship. You begin to reach out in ways until you build that relationship. Sometimes we see parents who want to really bring in a lot of controls and boundaries and do all that, but they don't have the relationship. Typically when somebody's telling somebody what to do and there's no relationship, a lot of times we could call that abuse even. And so certainly to a young person, that can feel like that. So make sure you build the relationship. Just take time wherever you're at to begin to build that relationship.
What fantastic advice. Thanks so much for being with us today, Gary, and for passing on your wisdom and knowledge.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I'll tell anybody that I can, anything I can help them with. So praise the Lord.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Gary Mason is the pastor of Medicine Hat Family Church. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.